where kids go nationwide and you decide who's on your side. Every day on Nickelodeon.
Hey!
My green team is tough, rough, and we're ready to win. Why, guys?
Well, Mikey, today's Friday, and the purple team's gonna whip the green team!
The kid is not kidding!
This video is brought to you by Patreon. Patreon. The right stuff. 1990. West and East Germany reunify and become plain old Germany again. The first McDonald's opens in Moscow, and world leaders meet in Paris to formally call an end to the Cold War. Nelson Mandela is released from prison in South Africa, Margaret Thatcher resigns from Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, and the World Health Organization removes homosexuality from its list of diseases. Iraq invades Kuwait, and American forces are moved to Saudi Arabia in preparation for military conflict. The Hubble telescope is sent into orbit, the Human Genome Project begins, and the first consumer digital cameras enter the market, as does the first version of Adobe Photoshop. Voyager 1 sends back the pale blue dot photograph, and people get dino fever with the discovery of Sioux in South Dakota, the best preserved Tyrannosaurus rex specimen ever found. In movie theaters, Home Alone, Ghost, Kindergarten Cop, and the way too good live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie, one of the final projects for Jim Henson, who passed away unexpectedly that year. On the radio, Sinead O'Connor's Nothing Compares to You, Madonna's Vogue, Billy Idol's Cradle of Love, and Wilson Phillips' Hold On. In bookstores, Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett's Good Omens, and the go-to gift for high school graduates, Oh, the Places You'll Go, the final Dr. Seuss book published in his lifetime. Super Mario Bros. 3 finally reaches the United States, as does Dr. Mario, though if you're a Sega Genesis kid, you're probably playing Phantasy Star 2. And we see the births of Kristen Stewart, Margot Robbie, and The Weeknd. On television, the series finale of Newhart reveals it was all a dream. The Simpsons have their first Treehouse of Horror, and The Undertaker makes his debut in the WWF, as well as the premieres of Beverly Hills 90210, In Living Color, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and Twin Peaks. And oh boy, was it a good year for children's television. In response to a healthy youth market and the now undeniable success of Nickelodeon, network television began expanding their children's content with dedicated programming blocks. On September 8th, we were given the Fox Children's Network, or as it would soon be called, Fox Kids, premiering with fresh animated fare like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, Tom and Jerry Kids, Peter Pan and the Pirates, and Bobby's World, introducing a new generation to Howie Mandel. 2 days later, on September 10th, Disney premiered its Disney Afternoon syndication block, bringing together reruns of DuckTales, Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers, and Adventures of the Gummy Bears with new programming like Tailspin, bringing to fruition Michael Eisner's desire to bring Disney back to television. Many have argued that Disney Afternoon did more to save the company from its 70s and 80s slump than even the animated film renaissance. And even outside the programming blocks, tons of new shows for your Saturday mornings, though most of them were short-lived. Barnyard Commandos, The Wizard of Oz, Gravedale High, The New Adventures of He-Man, Kid and Play, and Little Rosie all received one-and-done seasons. Much more successful was the first of many collaborations between Warner Bros. Animation and Steven Spielberg, Tiny Toon Adventures, bringing the Looney Tunes franchise into the 90s. And then there was Ted Turner and Captain Planet and the Planeteers, a show about protecting the environment that is arguably clumsy and oversimplified, but also the most blatantly political children's cartoon ever. With messages about protecting the environment and having empathy for people different than you, including an episode attempting to dispel myths about the AIDS epidemic, you can imagine the demographic that took umbrage with this show. And speaking of political cartoons, on April 21st, we got Cartoon All-Stars to the Rescue, a half-hour anti-drug special that was simultaneously cast on ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, PBS, the USA Network, BET, the Disney Channel, Telemundo, Univision, and yes, Nickelodeon. You could not escape it if you tried. Sponsored by McDonald's, introed by President George H.W. Bush and First Lady Barbara Bush, and starring characters from several children's franchises teaming up to help a young boy deal with his drug problem. It is a gloriously stupid piece of late 20th century corporate cheese. As for Viacom, 1990 was about positioning itself as a major player in entertainment production, starting with a new logo. The chunky V thing was out, and sharp angle fonts were in. This wouldn't be noteworthy by itself, except the company took full-page ads out in the newspaper to announce the new logo. Look at us, we're a serious company. The big move for Viacom, and Nickelodeon of course, was the expansion of television production in Florida, becoming the third largest entertainment producer in the state after the Walt Disney Company and MCA Incorporated. Outside of their cable projects, Viacom was using studio space at Universal Studios to produce action-adventure shows like The Adventures of Superboy and Superforce. But using studio space is one thing. Having your own studio space is another thing. On June 7, 1990, Nickelodeon Studios finally opened its doors to the general public. One part production space, one part theme park attraction, Nickelodeon Studios was the next big step in Nickelodeon's pop culture dominance, and yes, it will be getting its own video. As for the channel itself, Nickelodeon introduced 9 shows this year, 3 originals, 1 package show, and 5 imports, plus a pilot for a show we normally associate as a 1991 release. However, while there's a lot of content there, very little of it had lasting impact. While it may have been the 90s, what we think of as 90s Nick was still a year away. Actually, Nickelodeon in 1990 might be better defined by the shows that ended. We saw the final broadcasts of Star Trek the Animated Series on March 4th, Dr. Snuggles on March 31st, The Mysterious Cities of Gold on June 30th, Finders Keepers on August 25th, and Total Panic on September 30th. All of that, as well as the end of Nickelodeon's first 2 pillar shows, Pinwheel, and you can't do that on television. Pinwheel, the show that started it all. Without it, Nickelodeon would never have come into existence in the first place. Yes, the show hadn't made a new episode since 1984, and the reruns were really running out of gas. Yes, the low production values were being overshadowed by various imports, and eventually, new Nickelodeon productions like Eureka's Castle. But it was still sad to see it go, airing its last on June 29th. You Can't Do That on Television would continue to air on the channel for a few years yet, all the way to 1994, but 1990 marked the end of the show's production, with its 10th and final season, the last new episode airing on May 25th. While the show had given the channel a roadmap to survive the 80s, with its kids rule attitude and iconic green slime, the channel was now outpacing it with shows like Double Dare. The ratings for You Can't were dropping, television production was being concentrated in Florida, it was time to move on. For Nickelodeon, 1990 was a final cleanup of their 80s experiments in preparation for what lay ahead. But before we get into that, let's slip over to the Nick at Night corner and see what they were doing in 1990. SCTV ended on March 4th. On March 31st, Private Secretary, The Ann Southern Show, and Car 54 Where Are You aired their last. April 2nd, The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis was added to the schedule, a dopey teen comedy which was a direct inspiration for both Happy Days and Scooby-Doo. On June 4th, talk show parody Fernwood Tonight and its follow-up America Tonight were added to rotation. Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In was removed on July 29th, and the spine-tingling anthology show Alfred Hitchcock Presents was added on August 4th. A real change of pace from all the sitcoms and sketch comedies. This allowed for a Alfred Hitchcock Presents Halloween marathon that ran from October 29th to November 4th, along with a contest, Dead Giveaway. Call in and tell us how many characters died in the show's run, and you could win a murder mystery dinner cruise. And that is your Nick at Night corner for 1990. So, coming into 1990, Nickelodeon had a problem. A total panic problem. Their attempt to fill in the Sunday morning hours, a space that was pretty dead for most channels as to not compete with church. Originally airing for 3 hours, then 2 hours, Total Panic was a hodgepodge of poorly constructed games, guests ranging from Hulk Hogan to Ed Koch, and a child audience that was borderline comatose at times. It just wasn't very fun TV, but come 1990, that wasn't its only function, as it was among the first productions open to the general public when Nickelodeon Studios officially opened their doors on June 7, 1990. It was no longer just a television show, but a theme park attraction. A 2-hour theme park attraction. You see the problem with that, right? And that's not counting the waiting room time beforehand. The idea of paying to get into Universal Studios and spending 2.5 to 3 hours of your day on Total Panic just seems absurd. Why bother when I can go to a super sloppy Double Dare taping, which takes a quarter of the time and is 10 times more fun, and then I still have plenty of time to ride the rides. Total Panic was pulling double duty, and it wasn't good at either duty. The show needed a complete revamp, and shortly after the studio opening, Total Panic production was shuttled, its remaining episodes airing up through September, and production went back to the drawing board. The most obvious thing to do was to shorten episodes from 2 hours to a half an hour, allowing for a much greater tourist turnover. And if it's going to be shorter, it really isn't living up to its function as a Sunday view sync, so we may as well make it a proper weekday show. Let's bump up production a bit, revamp the sets, and not have to rely on leftover props from Make the Grade, and let's really focus on amping up the energy of our audience. And what about the hosts? Well, that's a tricky question. Greg Lee and Molly Scott really seem to be showing fatigue at this point in the production of Total Panic. It was affecting their on-screen work. It might be time for a fresh face or two. But do you go with a teenage host or stick with an adult host? Both have their pros and cons. Younger hosts might appeal to younger audiences better and help with Nickelodeon's by kids for kids image, but most were inexperienced and had a knack of stumbling over their lines, as seen in shows like Rated K and Don't Just Sit There. On the flip side, adults were much more professional and could work longer hours, but there's a certain crossing the age gap quality that few ever possessed. Mark Summers was lightning in a bottle for this reason. Ultimately, it was decided to switch from adult hosts to kid hosts and just ask less of them. Well, with a new format, a new time slot, a new set, new hosts from a new generation, well, it's hardly Total Panic anymore. We may as well call it something new. Announced on July 15th, 1990, and premiering on television on August 13th, 1990, this is Outta Here.
Beamed out of the first world headquarters for kids, Nickelodeon brings you Outta Here.
The show that's got what you want.
When you want it,
How do we know?
we ask. So what time will be good?
Let's see, come home from school, eat donuts, beat on my brother. How about 5-4 Central?
Definitely 5-4 Central. 5.
5 Central!
5-4 Central.
It's unanimous.
Play it at 10 after 3.
Well, almost. Outta Here. What you want, when you want it. Weekdays at 5, 4 Central, only on Nickelodeon.
Outta Here, with a logo pointing directly at Florida so you know which here it's outta, is a loosely formatted variety show with product reports, celebrity interviews, and music videos, but mostly games. There were 4 hosts: Tiffany Hunter, Bruce Klassen, Karen Germain, and Mike Daniels. That may seem like too many, but there were 4 distinct host roles, and these kids would be assigned to a particular role determined by votes from a studio audience of 100 children.
Hi, I'm Karen, and it's purely coincidence, but I've been voted to be captain of the Green Team! Yes!
Ha! Please don't adjust your set. It's Mike, and I'm going to be the captain of Purple!
Hi, my name backwards, it's E-Curb, and I'm going to be at Universal making some music of my own.
And I'm Tiffany. I'm more than happy today to be the host of Outta Here! Woo!
Said studio audience would then be split into 2 teams, green and purple, 50 kids each, with each team getting one of the hosts as their captain. The 2 teams would compete throughout the episode in various games like Celebrity Trivia, or bopping a beach ball the most amount of times in 1 minute.
Soft hit, soft hit, soft hit, soft hit. Come on, soft
Pete, you guys are doing great. Softer, softer, softer. You guys are doing great. Awesome.
Okay, they're both maintaining good control. The green team's hitting it around lightly.
The winning team would win a grand prize of a toy, usually. A third host would MC things, intro the games, and keep things moving. And the fourth host would go out into the field at Universal Studios, showing off the park's various attractions and interacting with the guests, which often included insulting their appearance.
Those who know me up close and personal know that I'm a woman with a mission in life. For some, that mission might be to help the world be a better place to live. For others, it might be to help the needy. But for me, I find as many people as I possibly can who look like Roseanne Barr. Come with me as I begin my search. I began my day with a startling discovery. The real Roseanne Barr, right here at Universal. Imagine my surprise when right around the corner, I met the woman who looked more like Roseanne Barr than the real one. And when I met this Roseanne Barr, I knew that after a long and difficult journey, my mission was complete. Who would have thought that so many women look like Roseanne Barr? So many other women. Back to you in the studio.
Hahaha, those women were fat. The show did have one remaining connection to Total Panic, with Greg Lee going from host to announcer.
A promotional consideration was provided by Total Recall video game. Get ready for the ride of your life in Total Recall, the NES game based on the Schwarzenegger blockbuster movie. Defeat the Martian mutants, secret agents, and more from Acclaim.
While airing nationally, there's a certain local television vibe to the proceedings, highlighting people and events in the Orlando area, like local area skateboarders or archaeologists working nearby. 4 teenage movie critics, on loan from the Orlando Sentinel newspaper and their teen movie critic program, also appeared on the show in regular rotation. Yes, even after dumping Rated K, Nickelodeon still thought film reviews were something the channel needed. Bruce, Mike, and Tiffany were also Florida natives. In fact, Tiffany Hunter was originally a Universal Studios tour guide. For the record, Karen was from New York. They're all pretty okay. Their job was less about maintaining interesting interviews like the "Don't Just Sit There Kids," and more on keeping the energy high and the crowd cheering. Though the show did have celebrity interviews, though the celebrities rarely appeared on set. With the Florida production being a bit more out of the way of the show business pipeline, it was much more common for interviews to be filmed elsewhere ahead of time.
We go out and we talk to the kids. In fact, I've got questions here from kids that at Nickelodeon we said, well, what would you like to know? And we've got, let's see, Melissa and Jennifer from South Meriden, Connecticut. And they said, Jordan, do you have a girlfriend? They want to know, like, what was your first crush? Tell us, who was your first crush? Better yet, what was your first kiss? When was that?
It was funny because I didn't really know how to kiss, and the girl knew how to kiss, and I was trying to play it off like I knew how to kiss. Like I was, you know, big, mature, macho man.
I interviewed Vanilla Ice, and just as a side note, I remember one of the questions that was off the table was that I could not ask him what "word to your mother" meant. So it was him and essentially his mix master or DJ, and the question that my producer wanted me to ask was, hey, if I was your mix master, because at the time that's what it was called in the 90s, what would my DJ name be? And like, his DJ took like 2 seconds and looked at me and said, Wonder Bread.
The one that sticks out for me was Bo Jackson. I got a chance to interview Bo Jackson, and he was selling this little electronic game, which on one end you kind of played it, and it was football, and if you turned it 180 degrees, it was then baseball because he was the double threat.
Bo Jackson baseball and football. Either way you look at it, it's a winner. No one knows football and baseball better than Bo Jackson, and no one knows LCD video games better than Tiger.
Unfortunately, I can't explore this show as much as I'd like, as it's one of the more poorly preserved from its time period. From private collection uploads to YouTube, I only have about an hour of Outta Here footage, and none of it complete episodes. The show had a very short 4.5-month run, airing its last on January 4th, 1991. According to Bruce Klassen, only 40 episodes were filmed. I'm not so sure about that number, but if it's true, that's enough for one fresh airing and then one round of reruns. And, well, for the most part, Outta Here was too casual of a show to be worth recording. A woman shows off a new line of Reebok shoes, and then kids compete to see who can huck corn the fastest. I have footage of that. Imagine the low-key stuff I don't have footage of. It's no surprise then that the most well-preserved episode of the show was the New Kids on the Block episode, right when New Kids hype was still high. Games included putting puzzles of the New Kids' faces together, and then a weirdly conceived match what the New Kids have in their pockets game, where if someone in the studio audience has the same thing the New Kids have, they get a point.
Can you match this? What you got? This is a little stapler. Not much, you know. I carry it everywhere. Keeps me together. Check this out.
A stapler out of your pocket? Okay, guys. Jordan had a stapler. We're looking for a stapler. Anyone?
Jennifer, this is close now.
Ah, yes, I famously bring my full-size stapler when visiting Florida theme parks. My favorite moment from the available footage is when Donnie Wahlberg starts gushing about the Great Space Coaster.
Management says no, huh?
Well, we won't talk about that.
On the Great Space Coaster. He was the drummer.
Say hi,
Watch
Chris.
that show. Hi. The theme song. Get on board. Step in. I know every word to that theme song. All right. Okay, we're out of here.
They're out.
I bring this up because otherwise, Outta Here feels very sterile and artificial. Maybe that's not fair to say with so little footage, but what is there paints a show that is more about maintaining a high level of energy instead of worthwhile content. Ultimately, a bunch of empty calories. It is, well, a theme park attraction. It's certainly more polished than Total Panic, and that arguably makes Outta Here the better show, but it rarely justifies itself beyond being a low-key commercial for Universal Studios and the Orlando area. Boy, look at all the good times you could be having if you were visiting Nickelodeon Studios. This idea would continue to evolve in other shows. The next iteration of the Nickelodeon game show / theme park commercial would come in 1991 with What Would You Do?, which takes the games and guests format developed by Total Panic and Outta Here, but A, had a much more messy and wacky aesthetic, and B, they managed to convince Mark Summers to do it. But it was still a show. And here's the thing, this really shouldn't be a show. This should be interstitials between the shows. It wouldn't be until 2000, with Slime Time Live, that I feel this core idea was finally perfected. That makes Outta Here a stepping stone show. Not very interesting on its own, but the second draft of an idea that Nickelodeon had been and would continue going back to for some time. I wish there was more to say about it. I wish there was more of it, but with it not being considered enough of a game show to air on Nickelodeon Game and Sports, I'd say the chances of finding more footage are slim. Still, despite its shallowness, Outta Here holds the distinction of being the first true Nickelodeon Studios original. Not an older show that moved production there, but a true made-for-the-park program. And that makes it the flag to start our race into 90s Nickelodeon.
Nick, 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 Nickelodeon. Nick, 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 Nickelodeon.
Next time, we dive into skate culture with Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Warning, this show had at least one real-life murderer in it. Today's research shout-out goes to the YouTube channel of Bilaal Smith, who over the years collected a huge amount of interviews with people who worked in Nickelodeon productions, including some more obscure figures like Outta Here hosts Bruce and Michael. What the channel lacks in production values, it makes up in sheer volume. I go through it all the time for my research, and it's high time he got a shout-out. Link to his channel in the description. Thank you all for watching. If you'd like to support Knacks and other Pop Arena projects, consider contributing to my Patreon. Every dollar goes to production values, research materials, and food, so I don't die of starvation. You can also support the channel by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, hitting that bell icon for notifications, following me on Twitter, sending a one-time donation through PayPal or Coffee, and sharing knickknacks with all your friends. I'll see you next time. And remember, Black Lives Matter.